whereby you don't have to have any hemming seams. So everything is done double. The inside is just as neat as the outside. Welcome to today's video. Today I'll be showing you how to make a tight stretch blouse, either for a sari, a lehenga, any kind of top really. I'm using this gold fabric. It's got a shimmer to it and the back is actually grey, so you can see that there's a little bit of a shade going on there. The thread doesn't have to be exactly the same colour, but you're going to need your measuring tape and your scissors. I do recommend you watch my video on how to measure yourself so you have your measurements and you know how to put them down on the fabric. What I have here is leftover fabric. I use this to make a pair of leggings and I'm pretty certain that that is enough for the front and back of my blouse. But I also want to line the front with the same fabric so that I don't have the hemming and it has the same pull. So if I use any other stretch, it may have a different kind of stretch in it, and I want it to be the same. I have noticed that my fabric stretches more this way than this way, but there is a little stretch this way too, so I will probably use my fabric that direction because, like I say, I don't want it to be really stretchy, just a little bit of comfort. As we go along, I'll be telling you my measurements that I'm cutting, but don't forget you need to substitute that with your own. Although I have my fabric in pieces like this, I do have 1 meter of fabric, which is going to be enough to make a small crop top plus the lining on the inside. This fabric that I'm using is 60 wide, so this is how I'm going to place my blouse so that I get everything I need out of this fabric. First of all, I want to take my bust measurement, being the biggest part, and fold over the fabric. Although I need 18 inches across, when it's ready I'm going to add on seam allowance and I'm going to do 1 inch each side. So I'm actually going to cut it at 20. So take your fabric, just fold over the fabric at 20. So there we have 20. So don't think you always need to have your fabric in one running meter. If there is enough for each part of your garment, it's going to be okay that you've got leftovers. Once you've folded your fabric at 20 inches, just cut to separate what you need. Now, the length that I want for this blouse when it's ready is 16.5, and I think I have just about enough. Okay, I have almost 19 inches, so that's a good seam allowance top and bottom. Now fold your fabric into 4 layers. Always keep checking the layer underneath meets your fold, otherwise one side will be smaller than the other. Now start pinning in your measurements. So for example, I know my shoulder from here to here needs to be 14 when it's ready, and I'm just going to pin this in with the seam allowance at 15, so at 7.5. So again, even though it's stretch, I'm going to keep the measurements as if it's not stretch fabric. My armhole needs to be ready at 9 inches, but I'm going to cut that at 8 because the stretch may fall a little bit more than you think it's going to. So let's cut that at 8, and we can always cut more if it's too small. But you can't do it the other way round. Coming in, I want to keep that quite straight, but I'm going to pin that in at 7 because that actually needs to be ready at 12, so 2-inch seam allowance again. And my neckline, I'm going to pin it in at 3.5. I want the neck to be 6 deep at the front, but only 2 deep at the back. So I'm only going to put in the back indication. I just want to recap the measurements that I've put in. I've put in my armhole at 8.5. I've put in my neck at 3.5, so 3.5 wide, and if the lycra stretches it might get bigger, so I've only kept that at 3.5. Normally I'd have that at about 4. I don't want the back neck low, so it's just going to be a simple round neck at the back, and I'm going to slightly shape it at the side. I've taken all these measurements in my previous video on how to measure yourself, and that's how I know where to put my measurements and how much I've measured. So head over to that video by clicking on the eye right now. After pinning everything in place, you just want to make yourself a little indication where you want to cut, or you may be confident enough to cut straight off. But just so that you know what I'm doing, I'm thinking of making these pins meet about here. And then to get this curve, I'm just putting my wrist here and I'm just using my natural motion. So that's how that's coming. If that is confusing for you and you're not sure what to do, what you could do is box up this. So you would draw a straight line up to here and a straight line here, making that into a square corner. And once you've drawn in these square lines, then you just curving off the two like that. As you start cutting, you can remove these pins and just use your scissors to turn as you're cutting, because that will help with this shape. And this is doubled here, so I'm just halving them so they separate. Keep that in for the moment. And again, for the neckline, you can put in a curve so that you know where you're cutting, like this. Once you've cut all of this, the last thing you need to do is give your shoulder a little shape. So you're just going to do this ever so slightly slopey, and just so that you can see what I'm doing, it's only like a 0.5 centimetre that I'm cutting away from the shoulder, and then keeping that dead straight to the neckline. And that is enough to give you that shape. When you've separated the front and the back, just fold this back into position, because you're now going to cut the front neck. And don't forget, we're taking our measurement from here. And I'm going to cut this at 5.5, because I really don't know how much stretch is in this fabric and what it's going to be like when we put it on and it's pulling. So again, just a little indication of what kind of neckline you want. I will make a video on different types of necklines. For this one, I'm going to keep it round. So it's just coming out before it goes in. I'm going to make that slightly deeper because I know that's not going to be right. And when I open this out, you can see now we have our neckline. Back and your front, roughly cut around your top. I'm just going to cut roughly. Now you should have your front and your back, blouse and linings. Join the neckline equally and have the armhole slightly smaller so that the actual fabric of your outfit curves inwards to compensate for the loss of lining. That will make sure that your lining is going to stay on the inside. I've folded the lining over and it's gold, so you can see that, and the actual fabric, you can see that looks grey, is your blouse piece. And what we want to do is cut the blouse piece armhole slightly bigger than the lining armhole. The right sides together and pin in your neckline. Just check that this is ½ inch all the way around. Now sew together your neckline, lining and fabric. When you're starting a new fabric, always check your stitch. What we want to do is join our neckline together. Follow your pins and just use your foot as a guide so you get a nice equal seam all the way around. Remove the pins as you go. Use both hands and don't push or pull your fabric. A good way to check whether your seam has come out right is to look at it on the wrong side. I'm quite happy on this side, and if we look at it on this side, that's quite a nice smooth half circle. So we can cut the extra fabric away. As with any curve stitch we do, we want to put in some nips. Each time the fabric slightly folds or slightly bends. That way, when we put this all the right way around, it'll be a nice smooth seam. Next, I recommend an understitch to keep the lining on the inside. To put in the understitch, what we want to do is take the lining, put it on your right hand side, and put all the other layers also on your right hand side, so that all you have left on your left hand side is the right side of your blouse. So put that under your foot, secure your seam, and this you could actually do on a zigzag stitch. And then put in a stitch as close as possible to the actual neckline, keeping all the layers to your right. Careful you don't stretch this, because the lycra is going to want to be stretched. So you can see my neckline, and already you can tell that the lining is curving inwards. Make it a straight stitch again. Take your armholes and sew these together. If it helps, pin this together. Once you have that pinned, sew these seams together. And once you've put in this seam, do the same for the other side. You can see there I've put in my shoulder stitch, and what we can do is turn this the right way round. So I'm happy this has turned out nicely. The lining is staying on the inside. You can see here, if I put my finger in, you can see that's staying on the inside, that's going to stay put. And now you can do the same for the front of your outfit. Be careful to measure your shoulders and get them exactly right, because that is something you need to have right now so that they match when you sew them together. I've just pinned down the back of the outfit so that you can see how this is going to look. I've got my measurements on point, so I'm happy with that, and the shape is fine and the lining is staying on the inside. So that was the main mission of sewing it this way. Now we don't actually have to hem at the neck or at the armhole, and it's going to look really nice and neat. What we want to do is exactly the same as we've done for the back. We're going to join the neckline together, absolutely equal, and then we're going to put in the understitch, and then we're going to join the armhole, which is slightly apart. I've sewn together the front neck, done the understitch. We got the seam in the shoulder here in the armhole, and on the other side we can lay these on top of each other now. Bring the two right sides together. And what we want to do is match up the shoulders. So if our measurement has come out right, these will meet here, which they do. But chances are, sometimes this is ever so slightly off and you want it to be a nice smooth line at the shoulder. If that happens to you, all you need to do is either make the front slightly smaller or the back slightly smaller, and make sure they match up when you're putting in the extra seam. It's usually easier to put in a seam to make it smaller rather than undo it and make it bigger. So if you are slightly off, it's not a problem. It is quite difficult to get that right first time. Just put in an extra seam and make one of them slightly smaller of our front and our back piece, just so that the lining and the actual blouse fabric stay together and they move as if they're one piece. Because when we get our other one, which is also moving around, it's going to be quite hard to control all four layers. So put in a side seam and also a bottom seam. It will help keep the neck and the shoulder fabric in place as well. Once you've secured your lining and your actual fabric together by sewing the sides, you can actually pin in your shoulders and your side. It's a good idea to put the pins in first so that you can level everything up, and then once you've got it a little bit secure, you can start to measure that you've got the right measurements, and then you can pin the shoulder and the sides all the way down. Very carefully take your shoulders and bring these together so you know where you want to sew them, and then pin everything down. There's two things we're doing here. We're making sure the lining stays on the inside, and we're pinning in place where we want to sew it. It's all nice and smooth, it's the right size, and they're equal on both sides. You want to pin the armhole as well. Hold your pieces together and pin down. Once you've roughly pinned these in the right place, what you want to do is measure and make sure that this is going to be the right length for you. So take your measuring tape. You know that the armhole is correct there. and your seam is going to come here. So from here to here, that's 8.5. Now that we've pinned that together, time for the easy bit, which is to sew in our shoulders like this. I've already put my seam in here and here. Make sure your seam at the shoulder is really level, so the neck on neck and the actual armhole, because that will look really nice and neat when it's ready. You can sew in your side seam. Because this fabric is stretched, it's actually okay not to put a zip on it. So I've actually already put my seam lines in. I've got my seams in and I've brought it right in to fit her snug here. And to keep everything in place, I didn't want to put in like a straight ribbon. I needed something stretchy so that it would still fit over her head, and she could stretch it wide enough to go over her shoulders, yet still be nice and snug at the smallest part of her waist. I've just done a zigzag attached to the elastic only and turned it up once like this, and then secured the elastic in place both back and front at the sides. Now I know, because this fabric is just going to stretch, there's no real way the elastic is going to fall down or peep out in any way. But if your fabric is different to mine, if you're a little unsure, you can always wrap the elastic completely in fabric like this. I didn't want to have too many layers here so that it wasn't so bulky, so that's the reason why I did it like this. I'm quite confident that's going to stay underneath. And with that, our top is complete. So if I put this the right way round, I'm just really happy with the way this has turned out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. If there was anything that I could have done better or anything that I didn't explain clearly enough, please let me know in the comments below so that I can learn and make sure my videos going forward are improved. If there's any actual garments you want me to show you how to make, please put your requests again in the comments. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and share, and if you haven't already, subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of my videos coming forward with regards to my sewing, but you also get my travel vlogs and any poetry that I upload on the other sections of my channel.